Hello and welcome to a new episode of Morgana Radio, where I, your host Morgana Ray, interview the world's most fascinating thought leaders on We'll start over again.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of Morgana Radio, where I, your host Morgana Ray, interview the world's most fascinating thought leaders on money, love, and magic. And you are going to love today's guest, Kylie Slavik. She's unlike anybody that I've had on this show. She is such a dear, generous, brilliant, one-of-a-kind person. And what she's going to be teaching today is how to serve more and sell more with the power of your personal story. So what she's going to teach you is why story is the most important skill in today's oversaturated marketplace to get your message across authentically and still inspire action. And let me tell you a little bit about Kylie if you don't know her already, because the fun thing about what she does is you don't hear about her, but you hear about the people she works with, because their stories pull you in. And I have to confess that I get hooked so easily by story. I'm not great at remembering dates and details, but I remember stories from life. And stories change lives because they speak directly to our subconscious and they can heal. But let me go back to telling you a little bit about Kylie. Kylie Slavik has generated millions of dollars with online programs through story-based ads, through story-based copy and creating connection. She currently works with purpose-driven companies to increase their reach, impact, and profit through what she calls digital empathy. Oh, I love that. She's been online for 8 years doing everything from launch management, strategy, Facebook and LinkedIn ads and copywriting. And in her former life, she was a performance poet and an English major. Digital marketing happened by accident, but she's quite pleased with that. So the first question is, so how did digital marketing happen by accident? What's your story there?
Yeah, it's funny because everyone asks me why story, and I'm like, the real question should be why marketing, because the story stuff was just in me since I was like 9, 10, and I started writing poems. But like the marketing stuff, yeah, it was really, I was an English major, and I had like high ambitions to just be a career poet. You know, that's what I wanted at that time.
That's where the money is.
Yeah, and I just really didn't resonate with advertising or business or anything. And actually what happened was I have a spiritual teacher who is a astrologer and a Cherokee medicine woman living in New Zealand, and she looked at my chart one day and she said, you're actually supposed to be really wealthy and you're supposed to do business, and if you don't, you're actually holding your soul a grade back in school. And I was like, I was pissed. And this woman, like, I do everything. She's the only person in my entire life that I just do what she tells me to do. I think most of us in this industry are a little bit rebellious, but in this one relationship, I'm just relatively compliant because I have seen the results over like 15 years of taking her advice and then not taking it. So she tells me, you know, you need to be an entrepreneur. And I was like, well, what is that going to be like? You know, what am I even going to do? I don't know anything about this. And then, so after my 24-hour temper tantrum, I went to totally, I went to this bookstore. I went to Barnes & Noble the next morning and I got a book called, it was Yannick Silver, I think, or Mitch Meyerson. It was Mitch Meyerson. It was called The Stories of the Internet Marketing Superstars or something like that. And it's like names you don't even really hear anymore, but when you do hear them, you're like, wow, I've been around forever, you know? So it was like just anecdotes of what they were doing at the time to make money, and it's stuff that people don't even really teach anymore. But I got the sense when I was reading that book that this was I was thinking about scale, even though I didn't know what that meant. I thought, wow, I can reach the most amount of people, make the most amount of money, and have freedom in my life. So this is what I'm going to do. If I have to be an entrepreneur for my soul to evolve, then I'm doing it this way. Like, that's it. So yeah, I just got that book, and after that, that was it for me. I never really did anything. I don't think I ever went to a job after that.
I have goosebumps because like the beginning of my whole professional journey in my specific area of expertise began when I made a decision that money had to be my next area of spiritual growth. And I never heard your origination story before, so I'm going, woo.
Totally. I was really resistant, and then it, like now, when I look at my life and when I look at what I do every day, it does feel like a continuation of this spirituality, and actually see this distinction between, because I have a lot of friends that would consider themselves to be spiritual, and I see this really big distinction between the ones that are like entrepreneurial and spiritual, and the spiritual ones in terms of ability to problem solve, like sense of personal integrity, or sense of just, there's a different dimension of bringing business into your spiritual practice that I think for me, I understand now why this had to be, why this had to be my life. So yeah.
Say more about that.
Yeah, I think I spent like maybe 7 to 10 years before I started doing business, just studying with spiritual teachers and collecting. It was more like collecting information, or like sitting at the feet of these spiritual masters all over the world, and like really hearing the teachings, doing the practices. But when I had something that I brought into the world that literally wouldn't make it from one day to the next without me putting my energy into it, that's when I had to really put all that theory into practice, like great. Yeah, I was using it in my interpersonal relationships. I was using it in my own life. I was using it with my family, but all of a sudden there's this thing, and I don't have kids, so I'm sure like people that have kids can relate this in a different way to like having children. But for me, I have this thing that I've created, and it requires my life energy, and so things happen every single day that probably a quote unquote normal person would say, I'm not going to deal with this every single day, like this doesn't work for me. But it's like it gives me this opportunity to kind of sharpen those skills and continue to show up in integrity and in a high frequency, and show up for myself, show up for my clients, my colleagues. We have so many relationships as entrepreneurs that need to stay in really high integrity on a daily basis. And so that's where I get to really bring those practices into life. And before that, it was more just like, oh, I'm just going to read this book about, what Buddha said, or what Jesus said, or, and that's cool. I'm going to talk about it at the coffee shop. But I wasn't putting my feet in the fire, so to speak.
It's a lot easier to be spiritual alone on a mountaintop, not dealing with anybody or anything. Money and business can be a real spiritual teacher. So
Totally.
How do you specifically stay in integrity and stay profitable? What's your secret sauce?
I love that question. I'm actually on a mission to prove that you can make multi-millions, and hopefully, give me a decade or so and it'll be billions. But right now it's multi-millions, where I really want companies and brands to understand that they can be authentic and aligned in their messaging and still make a lot of money. And I've done it several times now, maybe not at the level that I want to, but I've done it to multi-million-dollar level. And I think the story is what allows for that to happen, because I tell people all the time that I'm not a direct response marketer. I just met somebody last weekend that told me that I was, and I'm starting to reconsider that statement that I am so strong about, that I'm not direct response. But he said that really, direct response just means moving people into action. It doesn't inherently mean manipulation or false scarcity or false urgency, or all these things that are kind of like, maybe they make a lot more money in the mass markets, but they're kind of gross to people like us. It's like, I don't like that. So
yeah, do they make the world a better place?
Exactly.
And what do they do to the person's reputation, and how many returns do they get anyway?
Well, there's always those numbers that we never see, right? With like the $4 million launches, and I know, I'm like, you didn't even make $1 million, like, so let's just, but that's neither here nor there. I think it really is the story. So when I started doing story-based ads, it was my first time ever doing ads. I'd never done ads before that, but I just started telling stories, and then people were really responding to that. And so I thought, okay, you know, maybe I should figure out why this is working or what is working. And I started studying screenwriting. I started studying a lot of just methodologies to make my stories more effective. And what I find and what I found is that the way that I construct a marketing story is it really bakes in to the equation the audience's empowerment, the audience's journey into their own greater self. And what I find is that really the soul of the audience responds to that. So you actually not only still make sales and still get results, but you're also developing a higher level relationship with your clients on the front end. So they're probably going to stay with you longer and invest more. And you may not get the mass market. Like most people that I work with, I'm just like, look, you're not Walmart. You're not Starbucks. If that's okay with you, then we can work together. You know, you only need to reach like 1,000 people this year, you only need like 1,000 customers or clients. You don't need 1 billion. And so really it is about finding that right story that encourages that. And what I also find is that it creates this sense of like brand ambassadry as well. So I am not like super well known, but my people are really, really loyal, and they send me people, and I barely have to market at all. Like I really do almost no marketing. And when I want to do something, I just do it, and they're ready to jump on board. And so that's how I'm still profitable and in integrity. For me, the story is the bridge.
And what I've seen of your marketing, because I kind of came into your sphere, obviously, through marketing. How else would I have known about you? But you have a really relational approach to marketing. So it doesn't feel like you're in it to get sales.
Right. And I feel like, and I was telling somebody that's been in this industry for a really long time and came to me and said, look, like what we've been doing isn't working. And I told them, I was reading their email sequences on the phone, and I said, look, line 3, this line is really saying there's a marketer in the room, you know. And I feel like if we give that impression, then we've failed. You know, we are pulling people out of their own story. So I feel like from the first ad to the landing page emails, or maybe some people do more like sales calls, strategy sessions, whatever. I'm super digital, but whatever your thing is, if that person feels like there's a marketer in the room, I'm being sold to, then you are pulling them out of their story and pulling them into your kind of world. And there's a time and a place for that, especially after they're a client and you're coaching them. Certainly, like, I'm not about one size fits all, and we have all these tools and we need to know when to use which one. But I do think that if someone is going through your marketing sequence and they feel like it's an ad, you're kind of like, you might make a sale, but you're not going to have the level of depth of a relationship that you could have with that person. So for me, that's losing. You know, for some people it wouldn't be, but for me it really is.
Well, especially because we're hitting a maturity point in the online marketplace where it's like we've seen those email templates before. And yeah, because somebody's selling them, and so everybody is like 3 massive mistakes to blah blah blah.
So boring, right?
It is.
And sometimes I tell people the only reason I do this is because I want to see better ads. You know, like that's not really true, but sometimes I feel that way. Like I'll go down my newsfeed and I'm like, you guys could just do so much better. Like entertain me at least, you know? Like.
Oh yeah. So let's start teaching. Like, so how do you choose a story?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I find, especially if there's a lot of women viewers, I find that the women have a harder time than this with men, because the first thing the women do is they go, it's not, you know, it's like my life stuff isn't important. You know, like I've had women on the phone with me, and I'm trying to pull a story out of them, and all of a sudden they tell me that they like led a corporate team to $5 million in sales in like 6 months, and they just never decided to share that with anyone. And I was like, but that really sets you apart from everyone else in your niche. So it's interesting. So the first thing is to let go of the story that your story isn't important, it's not significant, it's not interesting, or that it's boring, or that nobody cares. That's usually the first thing I have to do with everybody that comes to me. So we'll just start with that. And then after that, it's really looking at, so I like to start with the audience and then work backwards. So we need to know who we're talking to, and I think this is just marketing 101. You know, we need to know, who are we talking to, why are we talking to them, why should they care, and when we really understand that, I like to look at what is it that they want? You know, like I will sit down with my avatar for a couple hours before I write copy. So I'm like, what do they say that they want? And what do they actually really want?
Let's pause for a second for somebody who doesn't know what an avatar is. What?
Okay. Yeah. Sure. So when you're marketing, most people make the generalized mistake of just putting a really overgeneralized message up. But what you want to actually do is create sort of a lot of people will call this target market. I don't use that terminology myself. So I usually say like brand hero or avatar, and it's really that taking that mass market conversation and bringing it down into an intimate one-on-one conversation like what we're having now, so that when that person sees your message, they're like, that's me. And maybe even, yeah, exactly, like that face, like I'm a little creeped out right now, how did you get in my head and why? And
for those of you listening on iTunes, I'm sorry I didn't mention this earlier. This is all being videotaped, and you can actually see us at morganaradio.com and our...
There's that.
Yeah.
There's the facial expression was perfect because I would want people to feel that way when they see the message. And so if we know exactly who we're talking to, and we even know what their name is and how old they are and where they live and what keeps them up at night and what their deep, like maybe they say they want more money, but that's not good enough for me. Like usually what they want is more influence or more power or more, we need to chunk it down to like a one word emotion, because that's what they want. And so when you kind of know what that is, like maybe it's love, maybe it's trust, that's when like the empowerment marketing process starts, because now we know we're putting them on a journey of wherever they are now to trust. And so there's a natural story arc there. They don't trust themselves. What they really want is trust. That's what engaging with our brand is going to do for them. And so now we like go sifting for diamonds in our own life. Where was a time in my life where I didn't have trust and now I do? What happened? What were the thoughts in my head? Why did I resist trusting myself? Did other people come in and impact me? Like, were there external forces that were impactful? Because we have to have tension for a good story, or two energies coming together. Were there, internal promptings, synchronicities, just anything that would be interesting to a person? And not to, like, you wouldn't put all of that in there, because then now we're overwhelming them. But you just find one or two things that feel really interesting, intriguing, and you build a story around it. And now somebody who doesn't trust themselves, who's really looking, their soul is actually looking for an experience of trust, they see your story and they're just pulled in. Just like you said, you're pulled into story. It's like, it's kind of a DNA thing. It's like, we can't really not be that way, So that's one way, is like, what do they really want? And then reverse engineer. And
so who is your dream client? What does he or she want? There's the surface. Everybody thinks they want money, but what is a little bit deeper than that? What's behind that? And then share a story that touches on what they really want.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. And so sometimes, like, an easy place for most people to start is to talk in like a first person narrative. And I've done really well with those stories and ads and emails. And then if you want to make it a little more sophisticated, you can start bringing other people's stories, like especially with someone like you've worked with so many people over such a long period of time. It becomes more validating when an audience sees it's not just you, because the first objection that will come up is, well, yeah, that worked for you, but it can't work for me because I'm not good enough, or they start telling themselves all these stories. And so what I usually do at that point is, or before they even can go there, it's like, yeah, this was my story of reclaiming self-love or trust or faith. And like, here's 36 other stories about people that I've known that have done the same thing. And then it becomes sort of the objection part of the mind, which is really their self-sabotage to not getting what they say they want, starts to kind of move into more of like a childlike receptive space where they can go, oh, yeah, like maybe I can trust myself, or maybe I can have love or power or whatever. So that's so even just doing those two things, you're already probably stepping out of the everybody sounds the same syndrome in your industry or your niche, and now you're adding a new level of depth into your work, and people are much more attracted to that because it's real.
Well, stories are specific. That's You know, everybody's using the same buzzwords so that, you know, it just becomes background noise. But when you're telling somebody's actual story and the weird quirks of a human being, then it becomes interesting.
Exactly. I had a male client that I was working with yesterday, and he was sharing with me that his audience is sort of these high-powered CEO guys that kind of have everything they want, and they feel really isolated. Ultimately, like, he drilled it down to, they kind of feel abandoned by God, and they feel like they yeah, I know, I was like in tears, and they kind of feel like nobody else kind of got their back. They got to hold everything up, and what they're really here for is a bigger, like, spiritual mission, and their soul is calling them to something bigger, but they resist because they feel like they got to hold this empire together. And so, you know, I was asking him to break down, like, the hero's journey. What is their first phase of the hero's journey is the ordinary world. So I was like, what does their ordinary world look like? And he said basically what I just said to you. And I'm like, I want to know what's going on at their desk. Like, and so he shared this story with me. All right, so this guy's sitting at his desk. There's 40 pieces of paper that come across it. He doesn't know how to prioritize those top 3. And then it's lunch, and he reaches for a Red Bull, even though what he really wants to do is go to the gym. He doesn't have time. So it's just, he went on and on and on. But it's like, when we add those little details, then I actually read about this in a neuroscience of storybook. People's brains start to place themselves in the scene with you, but they add their own details. So now they're seeing themselves in their office, and now they're seeing the time they did something unhealthy instead of healthy. And that's when you know, if you're doing this at the first point of contact, then you are in a relationship with somebody, you know, so it's cool.
We can't help it. And for, you know, those of you listening or watching who like are shy about sharing your story, especially if you've just come out of a real painful thing. And by the way, the more humiliation and betrayal and shame there is, the better the story.
Right?
Oh my God. Yeah. And, I think the reason I'm kind of shameless about sharing my stuff is because at a certain point it doesn't even belong to me anymore.
Right.
It's for the person you want to help.
I really relate to that, and I really feel that with your, like, what you're doing. It's just like, it's like a service, right? I tell people all the time, this is a service. This is not about you. This is not about you needing an audience. This is not about you getting on a soapbox. You're actually sharing yourself generously so that other people can get the transformation they say that they want. And it's hard for people to get that. And so a distinction that I will make is that if you do have an experience that's painful or shameful, or maybe you don't want to share it, if you still have energy around it, it's probably not the best time to use it in your marketing. So it's like, let's not use when people come to me and maybe they've seen like a free course that I've offered or some of my content, but they didn't work with me directly, and they come to me and they're like, I did your story course and it didn't work. The first thing, like, I don't even need to look at their story. I already know that that's what they did. They got the vulnerability piece down, and they kind of like spewed. And I'm like, but that's not coaching. Like, you want to stay in the coach role, or you want to stay in the, like, I'm being of service role, and it's not the same story that you might share with your therapist. And so so I'm like, okay, let me see what you did, and then it never fails. So so we do want to share that stuff, especially when we're at the point where you are with it, where it's like, this isn't about me. Like, this doesn't, like, I can read this and there's no emotion except for maybe sometimes a little bit of humor, you know, or like,
I may tear up, but I'm not in that place anymore, you know?
Yeah. So maybe not unemotional, but non-reactive.
Yeah, I don't have any current shame around it anymore.
Right. You're not triggered by it. You're not reactive. You're not like, oh man. And so that kind of stuff is great marketing material for maybe a year from now, or however fast people process. I'm a slow emotional processor, so for me it's like, I'll share that in a year. Some people can just move through it in a day, but I don't do that.
Yeah. So. You know, it depends, but yeah, you have to be coming from the solution place.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah, exactly.
So we talked about choosing a story based on who you want to help, what they're craving, what story you can what true story you can bring in to kind of give them what they're looking for. What else do we need to know about storytelling? Like, what stories do we use when?
Mm-hmm. I have like this whole sort of complicated, like hero's journey arc that I use. It's probably too much for most people, but I will say this: I use in an entire marketing campaign, I use phases 1 through 5, and I consider the 5th one to be them making a buying decision, and you've got to take them through the rest of it in your program. So I can kind of just briefly share what those first 4 are, and then you just pull stories out of any of them, and you just put them everywhere. That's my thing. Is like, we could get really specific about which part and where to put it, but if you just put them everywhere, then you're good. So the first phase is the ordinary world, and we kind of described that with the guy at the office drinking Red Bull instead of exercising and feeling really isolated emotionally. So it's really like, where are your people at now that is really not tapping their potential? And when we can just show that to them, you know, we're doing an incredible service. I was sharing with my client yesterday, you know, if you're in the relationships niche, I want your stories to start with like, hey, you know, you're bringing coffee to your husband, and for the 700th morning in a row, he doesn't look up from the newspaper. And it's like, right? Like, how many people would feel like just instantaneously gutted by that statement? So that's the purpose of really understanding the ordinary world. What does it really look like to them? A lot of marketers would say like, oh yeah, you have bad communication with your husband, or, you know, we're looking at results, you know, 3 steps to better intimacy or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but how many people get ignored every morning over a newspaper? That's really real. And so it's like, the more you understand what their ordinary world is like, the more you can put it in your copy. And the more, even if somebody doesn't have that exact scenario, they still know what it feels like to be ignored and not appreciated, and they're just going to see themselves there. So the more you can, so whoever your client is right now, if you just spec out like all of those pain points, but actually put the details to the pain points, that, like, what does that look like when they're driving in their car, or, you know, rushing to work, or whatever they're doing, then this would be more of, actually can be specific about where it goes. This would be more front end stuff, like first point of contact. So if you're doing ads, it would be in your ad. If you're doing a talk, you know, you could open a talk with something like that. If you're doing a webinar or a video, then you would really just open up with something that comes from that first phase in the hero's journey. And every movie does the same thing. It's like, Dorothy is in Kansas, and that's her ordinary world, and it shows it for about 15 minutes. Most movies are going to show the ordinary world for 15, 20 minutes, and then it's like something happens and they go on their journey. So the second phase is the call. And the way that I position that in coaching and marketing and business is that, like, your person who's stuck in their ordinary world, who's being ignored, who's at a job they hate, whatever's going on for them, they feel something inside of them calling them to something bigger. That's why they're looking for you. You know, that's what you can help them with. And so there's 2 things here that you want to know. You want to know what that call is. Like, what do they want to be? Identify that very specifically. Like, do they want to have a business? Do they want to have, you know, more time? Do they want to travel? Like, what is their call? And then what's at stake for them if they stay in the ordinary world and don't follow the call? And when you can really take the time to, for your avatar, really do some, you know, I have like pages and pages and pages of this stuff just like before I even go to write. And then my copy takes 5 minutes because it's just like I'm hitting all those points up. So that would be something that you would still kind of put in the front end, like in the ad, or, you know, on a landing page or in a video. And then, that's enough usually for that sort of initial point of contact with somebody, is the first and the second, like, hey, this is where you are and this is where you say you want to be. That's enough to get somebody engaged in a conversation and to be interested and to not feel marketed to, but actually to feel deeply understood. You mentioned my word, digital empathy, and it's like, this is what we're talking about right now. And they feel your marketing should already be enrolling somebody in a coaching connection. So this is how we're doing it. And then The third is going to kind of be objections, like what we call objections usually. So the third phase is going to be refusal of the call. So now it's like, I don't look at objections as people saying no to me. If they don't want what I have, then there's no objection. They just don't want it. If they, right? Like if they don't want it, they don't want it. But if they say they want something that I can help them with, and I know I can help them with it, and now all of a sudden they're freaking out, then what I know is they're refusing their call. They're not refusing me. They're refusing their call. So now my job is to tell them stories to move them through that. So we look at what is the specific objection. So here's another thing that people can do is list out all the common objections that they've heard and find stories that will just move people into a more expansive way of seeing it. So it's just a reframe. And a lot of times it's going to be money. A lot of times it's going to be time. So you just find ways to talk about when you didn't have money or when you didn't have time, and actually how that was really the time that you had, like, because you didn't have money and time, you had to say yes. And I have so many stories like that are really true. And yeah, then the fourth phase is meeting the mentor. So that's you. That's like, you're not the hero of the story. They are. You're the mentor. And so the mentor, so really that becomes kind of looking at what do they need to believe about you, like what do they need to believe about your program. So it's really, the fourth phase should already have been baked into the first three, but sometimes you may need a little bit more in the story for them to trust you a little bit more. So I would say if somebody focused on those first three components, they could build an entire marketing sequence from that, and then make sure that sprinkled throughout the whole thing, we've got reasons to trust you and reasons to like you, and a lot of that does, like you've said, come through sharing those details or those emotional moments that builds that trust and likability. So I know that's a lot, and I tried to keep it really, really simple because I could go on and on for hours about this, but that should be enough. Like if somebody just writes that stuff down and starts keeping running lists of these things for their audience, then your marketing campaigns are going to be much better than 99% of what you see when you log on to Facebook.
My favorite piece of what you shared for like all of the healers and coaches and do-gooders who are going to be listening and watching this is the difference between saying no to you and saying no to their own call.
That was a huge thing for me because I'm really rejection sensitive, which is another reason like why being in business is good for my spiritual practice, because it's like you just deal with rejection every single day. It's just a part of life as an entrepreneur. And so, I mean, we're inviting rejection, like every time we market, we know like 90% of people are not going to want what we have. So when I realized, when I started studying the hero's journey is when I realized that this is what was happening, because I saw this clear correlation between a marketing funnel, which I'd been doing for years, and the 12 phases. And then I said, ooh, objections are just them objecting to them. And then I was like, okay, so this is not personal. And now that I'm not afraid and getting on a sales call or making a video thinking, what if they don't like me or what if they reject me? Now I can actually be powerful for them because that's what they need. They need somebody to, I mean, you've been doing this forever, like they need somebody to take a stand for them when they're not willing to do it for themselves. And
hopefully, if your story is really good, you will repel the people who don't resonate and you will never have to hear from them.
I'm so glad you brought that up. That's when I said the first thing that most women especially need to deal with is realizing their story is important. The second thing people, especially women, need to deal with in good storytelling is being polarizing, which the men that I have worked with don't have a problem in the world with, and the women seem to. And I'm not like a gender generalizer either, but this has just been my experience where the women are like, oh, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, or I don't want to stand really strong in this story because it'll alienate someone. And it's like, no, you need to let those 95% of the people drop off and never call you.
No, my husband has this superpower of really not caring what other people think about him. And I look at that with awe, like, what planet are you from?
So good, right?
Yeah. So to wrap up, we have You were really generous about offering a free gift to get people started, and it's posted with your interview at morganaradio.com. Could you describe what you're giving to our audience?
Sure. So it's about a 20-page workbook that goes along with a 45-minute audio where I did like a live coaching demo to kind of get you through the exercises so you can just see the practical application of it. And if you do the whole audio course with the whole ebook, it will take less than 2 or 3 hours, but you'll have your story kind of specced out in 6 different formats that we see really, really commonly used in marketing. They're not as deep as like the hero's journey stuff we've been talking about, but it's nice because it's simple, easy ways that you can just incorporate stories into what you're already doing really simply.
And if you're starting out in your business, this is going to put you so far ahead of the game, because it's not about selling yourself or selling a service. It's about telling a story. And if you've been in business a long time, this is going to raise your game. So wow, what an amazing gift. Thank you so much, Kylie. Do you have any final words of wisdom before we sign off?
I just like what you were saying, it may feel scary or it may feel like it's not important, but absolutely telling the story will put you light years ahead of where you think you can be and where most marketing falls short. So it's doing a huge service to people to do it. It's not selfish, it's actually a service. So yeah, that's the one thing.
Thank you so much. You are an awesome guest.
Thank you. It's been wonderful to be here with you.